What is the mission of the Corpus Christi Housing Authority?
The mission is really to provide low income and moderate income housing for our Corpus Christians.
Can you please explain the Workforce Housing Initiative?
The Workforce Housing Initiative is really about mixed income, and it's about opportunities for school teachers and for firefighters and police officers. It's really not about low-income subsidized housing. What the program looks like is that we are now the owners of the property, and so the development receives a tax break on the property tax. So in exchange for that, the properties commit 50% of their units to affordability for those in the middle. They are those folks that make way too much to be on low income anything, but not really enough where they can go out and start buying houses. They're just not there yet. It's that middle ground where people are just not quite there yet.
How did you come up with the idea for the workforce housing?
Well, actually, I was contacted by a developer or a group of developers maybe last summer perhaps. So there's been a conversation for some time. And I've actually seen it. It's been in Corpus Christi before now. I think it was maybe close to 10 years ago that there was a number of properties that were converted into this. And they were converted by an outside party, by Cameron County Housing Finance Agency. So it's been available for a number of years.
What is the market rate for a 1-bedroom and for a 2-bedroom in Corpus Christi?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number. I'd be glad to share that with you as a follow-up, but I don't have that specific number with me.
Okay.
I'm gonna kind of hop in and help
Okay.
a little bit
Sure.
with this because part of my job is to do the research and read the documents and
Sure.
all of those other things. Let's talk for a minute about Cameron County Housing Finance Corporation.
Okay.
So they initially began purchasing properties in 2022.
Okay.
Correct. So not about 10 years.
I thought it was longer than that,
Yeah.
but maybe it was only that long.
And so have you kind of looked at Cameron County Housing Finance Corp and what they've done as kind of a model for what you want to do here?
Actually, yes and no. There's some things about it that make some sense. Some things that don't. The one thing that does not make sense is it's what we call a traveling finance corporation. So it's Cameron County coming into Corpus Christi and Nueces County and doing business. I don't think that's a good policy. I think that's bad policy. In terms of what they're doing, I think it really does make a huge difference. And I think everybody would agree that low income and affordable housing is a huge issue in Corpus Christi. Our prices aren't outrageous, but our income levels are not quite as high enough to support that. Our median incomes aren't as high as some of the other communities, but our rents are very similar. So there's some difficulties there. Let's just say it that way, and issues with affordability. And talking about the numbers, I think we've already talked before that I have over 30,000 people on my Section 8 waiting list for the truly low income assisted housing, and so the federal government is never going to give me anywhere near enough resources to try to deal with that through the Section 8 housing. So one of the things that we try to do is to try to determine other ways that we can provide value to the community. And the first thing we did was Thanksgiving homes, and that's been more than 10 years ago. So that's one example of it's not housing that's intended for extremely low income, but yet it is for those people that are often caught in the middle. And there's no government money assisting these either. So that's something that we can do. And so this focus on the middle, if you will, is something that really goes hand in hand with this idea that we're doing with the WHO program.
There's a lot to unravel here. So from the perspective of 30,000 people are on the Section 8 waiting list, this program does not address any of that.
Does not address that at all. That's not what I'm trying to suggest. What I'm really trying to suggest is that there's a great need. And there's a great need at every level. There's a great need at the lowest level, there's a great need at the moderate level, and there for a number of years, there's a great need even at the fully non-subsidized, just a lot of demand for housing, that was pent-up demand out there. So this is really, again, I'm trying to address those that I can. I don't have a tool that I can address the ultra low income through a program like the Section 8 program. That's just a subsidy that comes about $3 million a month that we provide out, and I can't touch that. I don't have the resources available to double that or triple that, which is what's truly needed. So without the resources to deal with that, I can sit there and do nothing, or I can say, well, I can't fix that problem, but I can help with this other problem, with the middle income group. So I can impact that.
Right. So experts tell us that, we've looked at the agreements that the Housing Authority has entered into, and when you have, for most of them, it's 40% of the housing is at 80% AMI, 10% at 60% AMI. Experts tell us that truly there is plenty of affordable housing at 80% AMI, right, at that rate. And that essentially it really doesn't even make a dent in creating any kind of workforce housing, affordability, and that truly to address the issue, it would need to be at 50% AMI. What would be your response to that?
Well, let me understand what you're asking, because in one phrase you said there was plenty of it available, and then you said it didn't make a dent. So please help me with that.
There's plenty of housing available for somebody who makes 80% AMI at the rates that these complexes are now charging, is what experts tell us.
Okay, I'm not going to comment about what an expert might say. That's not my experience with what I see.
Okay.
So I can tell you that one of the things that we've been working on this, 60, 90 days, we've been really engaged. And I had some numbers pulled today, and we have over 700 folks that are already in these new units at these new numbers. And what that does mean is it does mean greater affordability for these folks that even if they may have been in that apartment, I don't know, some of them might have been, but if they were, they're now at the new income rates or new rental rates, which is going to create a greater affordability in order to save for a house or to buy groceries or whatever else people are needing to do in today's economy.
In looking at the appraisal district website, the Housing Authority has 100% ownership of roughly $350 million worth of property. What did the Housing Authority pay for those properties?
The Housing Authority did not pay anything for those properties. The Housing Authority entered into an agreement where we offer the tax exempt status. So we have a ground lease back on them. We are also a managing member of the group that owns the property. So it becomes similar to a tax credit property in that range, in that it's the Housing Authority does not own all of it, it just owns a portion of it, and it has some control in what's going on.
What portion of these properties would you say the Housing Authority owns?
Well, we own 100% of the ground. If I don't, what are you?
That was my question.
Yeah.
So you don't own any of the improvements,
Right.
which is the majority of. The appraisal district currently still has fees assessed, and now they're assessed to the Housing Authority, taxes, right?
Okay.
They have not exempted any of those taxes. They've told me that the Housing Authority has not applied for any exemptions. Kind of break that down for me.
I do know that applications have been submitted because they're asking questions about it. So I'm not sure exactly what they're saying that's not been submitted.
Yeah, the interim chief appraiser told me yesterday that no application for an exemption had been filed by the housing authority.
I don't understand that because the appraisal board has asked me many questions about those. So I don't think I think there must be some sort of a miscommunication in that aspect.
Okay.
But,
So what
but
is the process if the appraisal district denies an exemption? What would the housing authority do at that point?
I wouldn't predispose, but what we would do, but I can tell you that state statute is very clear that all property of the housing authority is tax exempt. So it's just becomes a matter of education and understanding what's going on. So I don't think that I'm not trying to be adversarial necessarily, but it's very clear that the legal people have taken the appropriate steps, and this is perfectly legal, and quite frankly, going back to your question about Cameron County, it was perfectly legal in Cameron County, so why wouldn't it be perfectly legal today?
Well, Cameron County is also now, the Housing Finance Corporation is being sued, and there have been there has been injunctive relief granted with relation to Cameron County, who also owns $200 million worth of properties in Corpus Christi.
I don't have any specific knowledge about that.
But ultimately, there is a question, and I think the question from the appraisal district is whether the housing authority truly owns these properties. And it seems as though the housing authority does not own these properties. They own ground, and the ground improvements are much different than the ground appraisal is much different.
This is done all over the state. It's done all over the country. This is not new math in order to determine. It's just getting an understanding, and I just don't think that the appraisal district has an understanding yet. And you talk about the appraisal district. Let's throw a couple numbers out. This thing that I saw is from the appraisal district is that their current appraised property is somewhere in the range of $29.5 billion. And if we're talking about $350 million, we're talking about 1% of the valuation. So we're really talking about a rounding error. And that same statement said that the property values are going up overall between 3.2% for residential and 9% for commercial, as I recall the numbers. And if that's the case, then 1% is a very small number in that, and even a very small portion of the increase that they're seeing this year.
Well, what it equates to is $7.5 million in uncollected tax for taxing entities, which we're told means either extreme cuts to budgets or other taxpayers picking up the additional.
Well, I would just say that if 1% valuation amounts to a massive cut in budget, that math doesn't make sense to me. So I would, our goal is not to take money out of the taxing jurisdictions' hands and coffers. Our intent here is to provide affordable housing and that middle housing. And the fact that we already have 750 families that are taking advantage of that tells me that there is a great need for that. And would these folks be on the street without it? Probably not. But does that commit to or translate into greater affordability for the rest of their budget? Absolutely. And that's our purpose here.
I guess the problem that I'm having kind of wrapping my head around this, right, is we've got a bunch of private companies who we are in an overbuilt apartment market, right? And typically what happens is when you have a high vacancy rate, in 2023 our vacancy rate was the highest in the state, okay? So typically what happens is the market will correct and rents will come down. By entering into programs like this, there's no requirement that the market adjusts.
Well, actually there is. The rents are going down.
But they're going down subsidized based on a tax, they don't have to pay taxes, which is how they're paying for their rents. But that rent discount, but ultimately the entire amount that they're saving in tax savings is not going to buy down rent. It's just not. Not if you do the math. Because we've done the math.
Okay.
So where does the extra money go? Does the housing authority get a fee?
The housing authority gets a land lease, so it's not a lot of money, but there is some, yes.
So in Cameron County, they talked about they grew a 250,000, revenue 7 years ago to now they have $6 million cash in the bank. Is this is it a hope of the housing authority to, through fees, kind of build up the coffers to do other things?
Well, I can tell you we've already started doing other things. So, for example, we've created what we call a CLEAR program, which is aimed at taking a, I use the word blighted house. It's a house that really needs to come down. It's probably not livable. So the CLEAR program is actually purchasing that house. They're demolishing that house and then returning it to a vacant property. And then once it's done, we will offer it to the building community to put housing up on that. So that is taking a dilapidated home and creating something back on the tax rolls. So it's actually increasing that for the tax rolls. So, and it's also, one of the things I see in Corpus Christi is that we have so many houses that I don't know why they're still up. They have holes, huge holes in the roofs and big signs on them that say no trespassing, but yet they're still there. So we are trying to start addressing those. I think we've bought 4 or 5 houses so far, and so we're in the middle right now of getting a demolition contract so that we can start getting the demolition done. And so hopefully by this summer hope to see some of those houses or some of those lots getting turned back to the community. And
is that utilizing money that you've received through fees? What are you monthly, annually? What are you expected to receive in these fees?
Probably annually, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but probably $900,000, $1 million a year total. So, again, we're not. The purpose here is not to get rich. I can tell you that one of the things that we are very in tune to is making sure that these properties are compliant. So we actually required them to pay us, each of the properties to pay us $10,000 a year so we can hire a person whose job is to go out and make sure they're compliant. So we will do a compliance audit on these folks every year. We will go in and we will look and see, we'll do random samples. Okay, show me your rent roll. Show me who you think qualifies at the 80% and how many are at the 60%, and just show me these things. And then once we see that, then we're going to say, okay, now show me the documentation that these folks actually qualify. Show me what information you had in order to make this decision. Show me their pay stubs, whatever that documentation was. So we are very in tune to that. We want to make sure that they're doing the properties are doing what they've committed to do. And in terms, you made a comment about the housing authority's involvement. I've already received multiple calls from the city code enforcement saying your grass is too high, or this person's complaining about ants, or whatever it was. There's been 2 or 3 of those. So we truly are involved in these apartment complexes, and so we have a responsibility to make sure that they're doing the right things and they're doing it the right way. And we want to make sure that we certainly never want to give the impression that these are anything other than very nice apartment complexes, and we want them to stay that way. We think that's important, but we also think that it's important that the concept of mixed income housing is important, and it's much better than warehousing all the poor people in this one apartment complex or that apartment, and I've actually had a person say, well, this is a great deal, but we should put them in someplace else. And I find that response to be offensive, quite frankly. And I think I think many people might understand that and might kind of agree with it on the surface to say, well, poor people need to, if we're going to pay a subsidy for these poor people, they need to be in poor areas so that it's cost effective. But it actually, all the studies that I've seen would show that place is very important as kids grow up. So if you have two apartment complexes, one is a bank lawyer and one's a school teacher or a cop, pick whichever you'd like to talk about. They go to school together. Their parent. What winds up happening is that the influences that the more affluent families have on kids tend to flow from kid to kid at that level, and so it many times you see it breaking cycles of poverty by getting people into a better place, into a better school district or a better school, makes a difference in the outcome of those kids' lives, and that becomes a forever impact. It's not a 1-year impact or this is what happened to the budget this year. We're talking about generational changes.
Right, but to be clear, that is not what this workforce housing is doing. Because when I look at, if you're talking about the very poor, right, there is one complex that has 30 apartments at 50% AMI. And so I don't disagree with you. I think having that kind of mixed environment, why do these apartments not have a requirement for 50%, except for one?
Well, because we didn't see the need for it, A. B, the numbers don't work. And C, it's the industry standard. The industry standard is the 80% and 60% level. And your statement that what I said was not true because I wasn't talking about ultra low income families. I never mentioned ultra low income families. What I'm talking about is truly mixed income. It's a teacher level, it's a incoming firefighter level, and then fully market. I'm not suggesting, don't believe I've ever suggested that this is addressing very low income. Some communities require a certain number, the properties accept a certain number of Section 8 vouchers. We don't have Section 8 vouchers to allocate to them. Even if we wanted to, even if we thought that was a great policy, that's not what we're encouraging. What we're encouraging is we want the property to stay a high level because we want it to attract young professionals and for it to be a market-based system. But I'm also very passionate on the idea that it does impact families because it does take a family or someone who could not afford to live in that neighborhood, now they can. There's a lot of entry-level police officers that are coming on board that are in the big training centers on the south side. Many of those candidates can't afford those apartment levels there. So that's really what we're talking about, is making this workforce housing. We didn't call it low income. It's not low income. It's not intended to be low income. It's intended to be workforce and to really impact that level, that area. And again, I think you made the comment that there's just not a need. Well, and that this is a huge impact. But yet we're talking about 1% of the total valuations. So if 1% change in valuation has a catastrophic impact on somebody's budget, their budgeting might need some look, because it's perhaps a little bit looking at the bright side completely instead of looking at reality. Because, you know, seeing a 3% increase in valuation, you know, I never see a 3% increase in my Section 8 vouchers. That's not going to happen. So I don't see that 3% coming through, and I don't see 3% or 4% increases in the rents that I can charge for the properties that we own either. So,
based on agendas, it looks like there are several additional potential partnerships in the works that could total up to $500 million. Are you in the process of entering into any other agreements? And I've got the list, if you need the list.
I don't know what you mean, agendas.
Well, the posted agendas for the Housing Authority Board.
We don't have any on the posted agenda.
Well,
Or you mean they've already been done?
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yes.
So
I think there's about 21 properties in total, and included in those we are talking with Cameron County about taking over their properties as well. So those properties we would take over, but there's no additional tax revenue at loss because it's already.
right.
So-
Although the city or county could also seek relief related to those properties as well.
They could.
So, yeah, I mean, that would be up to them. So these are the properties that I have listed as already belonging to the Housing Authority.
Okay.
And are there additional ones in addition to these that the documents have been signed, or are those still in negotiation?
They are still in closing. I wouldn't say they're necessarily in negotiation.
So the Caspian, is that one that is closed?
It
or
has
is in the
not
process
closed.
of closing?
Correct.
Okay. We already have Stoneleigh Shadow Bend Apartments.
I believe that one's in process.
Okay. Arts at Ocean Drive, I think that's
It's
already
closed.
closed. Churchill Square,
I believe that's closed.
Armand Bay,
I believe that's closed.
Breakers.
I believe that one's been withdrawn.
Okay, so that one's not a pending one. We already know Sandcastle closed. The Summit.
If you've got the list there, then that list, we have them on the
Well-
website, so.
Right. What I'm trying to determine, because for instance, Caspian is not listed, but that one's still in closing.
Correct.
Okay. I think the heartburn that public officials have shared with us is they didn't know this was happening. Clearly, it does impact their bottom line. Did the Housing Authority ever have conversations with the city of Corpus Christi, CCISD, Nueces County to talk about, hey, this is our plan, right? It might impact.
No.
Okay. What are the ongoing conversations with the city now?
I've had several conversations with the city. I'm going to meet with the city later today. But I mean, this is something that the housing authority's responsibility is to create housing, and that's what we're doing. So, I think everybody agrees that workforce and affordable housing is a big issue. The city's invested $6 million in affordable and workforce housing this year, and that was to create some 200 units. And we're building. We're looking at 700 that have already converted today. So we're making, for less money, we've already got more.
This is being called by some tax shelter for corporations. What would be your response to that?
I don't believe that's even anywhere near accurate. This is a new opportunity to provide housing for those folks that need it. It is for new families. It is for those folks that are caught in the middle. Too many times we do things for ultra low income, and I wish I could double my Section 8 vouchers. I really do. I wish I could do that today. I don't have the funds to do it. And quite frankly, with what's going on with our friends in DC, we're going to have fewer next year than we do this year because we're just going to see budget cuts. We all know that's coming. So I can't fix those things that I can't fix, but I got to fix those things that I can. And this is one of the things that I can fix and that I can address. And I believe it's to be a good deal, in terms of, and in comparison to a tax credit property. A tax credit property is for those folks it is a more of a lower income. Certainly agree with that. But it's also 70% of the construction cost is paid by the federal government. And then the city makes another commitment of another $1 million or $1.5 million for a 75 unit apartment complex. And then it's tax exempt when it gets there. So, if there's a complaint that they didn't know it was coming, I'll own that. Is it a complaint that we're taking things that are on the list or on the property rolls and taking them off? I can own that too. But I'm also going to suggest we're talking about 1%. It's a rounding error in their budgets. And I understand that that the city is talking about that they were already $5 or $6 million in the red when they started the budget. Last year they were $9 million. The fact that the city's in the red at budget time is kind of almost the way it goes. So they've got to pull out their magic and run their budget. And I'm not going to try to tell them how to do their budget. And so, it's not my intent to create hardships for anybody. That's never been the intent. But the intent and I believe the result that we can show is that there are people that are in this margin that this does help, and it becomes a great deal for those folks, and it's also, I would argue that I believe that it's going to be a great deal for Corpus Christi in the long term, because you might say it's overbuilt today, and I kind of tend to agree with you, but these agreements don't go away in 2 years when the economy's on top of the world and we're trying to recruit new industry into town. We're going to be able to say, hey, we've got all these agreements out there and we've got units that are available for workforce income folks that need it. So I believe it might be even from the city's point of view, it might be a shock to the system, for lack of a better word, but it will be easily and quickly absorbed into the system, and then it will have a long-term impact for the good.
Yes, I do believe it's a shock to the system, 100%, because you're looking at very large numbers.
You're looking at 1%.
Right,
You're looking at 1%.
But you're also looking at, ultimately, people are not convinced this is a good deal based on the terms, right? And you've explained that, but I guess if you want to paraphrase in short sound bites.
Well, in short sound bites.
Yeah.
It is a impact to the system, but it's a 1% impact to the system. So if I would say to people who are listening in today that is a 1% change in your paycheck, is it life-changing? And I think most people would say no, that it's not life-changing. So, and I'm also going to talk about, I think this is good for mixed income families to live in the same communities. And I'm not trying to talk about low income, I'm talking about moderate income. So I think that's very important, and I think it's valuable for the community. And I also think we need to look at this from a long-term perspective that says, yes, this is, is there some adjustment to get used to even that 1% change? Sure, there is. But looking to the future, and is this a good for Corpus Christi's long-term health? I believe it to be.